someone else who's not you, who didn't have a democratic process of election to have these issues push them through. If anything's, a conspiracy, look at the war in Iraq. A group of individuals who decide, okay, we're in Afghanistan, we've got bin Laden cornered. What we really ought to do is redeploy, tens of thousands of troops to a country that doesn't have nuclear weapons, but that we're going to say has nuclear weapons. That didn't work, so now we got to come up with chemical weapons. Now we're scrambling for different ideas. I hate to bring it back to that, but unfortunately, I think that people shouldn't be so afraid of a news outlet or a competitive independent media source as they should be afraid of just believing whatever they hear or to be suckered into a quick solution to an issue, because there is none. Most of these are multi-layered issues. Not everybody is going to agree with every politician about everything, Like someone was interviewing me about Ron Paul, and I said, there were some things about him that I really liked. And then they said, well, what about this and that? And I said, well, that's a little, idealistic. And then I remember there were people that were angry because I didn't agree with everything he said. Like, how can a man agree with everything that, and no disrespect to him, but this is true. He's a politician. He lobbies, he has days in Congress, he argues bills, he represents a constituency that isn't me. He represents them. How am I going to agree with him about everything that's right for the people that live in his part of America rather versus the people that live in mine? Obviously they're different, or he would be the congressman of Harlem, who, by the way, is a corrupt individual who happens to be a Democrat. And I think that has no bearing on it, Democrat or Republican. People have gotten used to eating at the same trough. No wonder they don't have any table manners. It's just the way it is. Applying our vision of how the world would be on other people is absurd, What if someone were to do that to us and come in here and say, oh, like I explain to people when they're a little confused about the black or Latino experience in America or in the hemisphere. I said, imagine if someone really did invade the Middle East, Not this thing that we did where we send a proxy in to fight against other people, or the Bush way where we take a few countries over, but really hardcore, old school, from antiquity invasion. The rape of women, the decimation of children, the destruction of religion, the destruction of a people's culture, to convince them that the Quran is a fraud, to convince them that the Prophet Muhammad never existed, that he's not a real figure in history, right? Imagine someone doing that to America, coming here, convincing everybody, Jesus Christ is a myth, the Bible is a fairy tale, you're all going to worship a different God, the one that I designate. You're also going to give your children to me. Everything about you that made you an American is going to disappear. Congratulations, you've just discovered the black and Latino experience for 400 years. That is the transfer of power. But that's not all of our history. That's not who we are as a people. That's unfortunately a small period of time within our history. Now, drawing from that example, you can apply it to a much larger scale to show people, listen, if we're suffering here in this particular point in America, that doesn't mean that we have to stay in that position forever. There is an amount of organizing that we're capable of doing. There are actions that can be taken. I really won't like them to get violent because I know how easily that can turn into utter chaos. But I'm telling you right now that if anything isn't done, then maybe that is the government strategy, to push people towards absolute breaking point status and then clamp down on them violently, which is what a lot of people feel like is going on. If you see the Occupy protest, it's a blueprint for what people are worried about who concern themselves with that. The city, the state, the police in Oakland or in New York, goading the protesters, pepper spraying women. At some point, people were going to break, and yet they haven't. If you're going to call them violent protesters, I think it falls into a contradiction when you have 20 to 25,000 people in a mob in downtown New York. Hey, if we wanted to rip the city apart, we could have right then and there. We didn't tear the city up. Why? Because we love the city. We didn't ruin America. Why? Because we love America. Obviously, a lot more than the people who claim that they do simply because they wave a flag. We want to make the country a more efficient place, a better place. We want people to invest in America, and I think one of the greatest failures of American capitalism was just in investing in systems and institutions. Those are great, but they have to also be matched with investing in people. You know, huge bailout for institutions and banks, none for people. You know, we give grants to universities. We need more grants for students that want to stay here. I think more than the message of materialism, what you're speaking about is the braggadocio attitude of hip-hop. I think the message of materialism is one aspect of that. To say that I'm better than you, I can say it in many ways. I can beat you in a fight. I'm stronger than you. I'm bigger. I have more people on the street. I got more guns. I have prettier women. This has always been kind of a back and forth, kind of teasing, almost a vaudeville, but also taken very seriously in the streets when people put their reputation up on the line. But I think having more money was something that came to the forefront as a part of the corporate involvement in hip-hop, and therefore them wanting to use that to be the ultimate trump card, to say, okay, who's got more skills? That's great. I'm glad that you can rap better than me, but I've got more money than you, so I'm better than you. You know, or you know, technically, you can freestyle better than me, but my video's on MTV and yours isn't, so I must be better than you. You know what I mean? It plays in every aspect of life. Think about it. Imagine if I'm a college professor, emeritus, Harvard. You know, I have wonderful ideas about the economy. They just so happen to help my friends that are themselves working at Goldman Sachs or somewhere else. You're a f***ing camera dude working for a show. But you know what? You've spent the last 20 years, excuse my language, researching, digging through books, reading the history of America, reading the history of the economic collapses that have occurred throughout civilizations through the passage of time. And you have amassed an incredible amount of knowledge, and you present that. Simply because I have more letters behind my name and I work for some fancy institution, people are going to believe me, and they'll go so far as to ridicule you, which is what happens in hip-hop. Doesn't matter how dope people are. Doesn't matter if they're incredibly skilled. I got more money than you, so I win. If that's not a corporate, I said so, I told you so, I don't know what is. So I link it directly to that. Why? Because a corporation that makes $14 billion a year, profit, mind you, I think you all out there know the difference between gross and net. I don't mean gross, I mean net profit, $14 billion. They come back one year, instead of making 14, they make 13 million. That company's looked at as a failure. Failure? You just made $13 billion in a year. How are you a failure? Because you're not growing, because you're not expanding, because you're not buying people, because you're not taking more, because you're not more aggressive, because you're not living up to being the virus that we all thought you could be. It's hard because I know a lot of my colleagues, and these are people that are involved in hip-hop and may not be as political as myself, but they also thinking minds. You know, these may be people who work regular jobs, but they're thinking minds, and they think to themselves, what does my vote really count for? You know, and I say to them that they should start with a local election and look at the numbers. Those numbers are decided by hundreds, and in some cases decided by tens, and in some cases decided by single-digit numbers. I mean, even if you look at Minnesota, at the Al Franken situation, wasn't his vote like 127, some ridiculous number like that? You can affect change in a certain way. I think what they feel disenfranchised by is that the candidate that they elected had all these promises and none of them come through. That, in an essence, makes them feel more frustrated than anything else, but I don't think they should stop voting for it. I think, though, there should be severe campaign reform. And when I say severe, I mean, like, you know, we're talking limitations to who can, you know, come up with billions and billions of dollars from other people, you know, the amount of debates that need to happen, the airtime that we afford individuals, the honest answers that we demand from people instead of allowing them to just glance off. You know, I remember when, even though he's not necessarily known as the world's most moral man, but I remember when John Edwards challenged President Cheney in a debate very late. I thought he should have come out much earlier with this, about him voting against Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday and all these other things that kind of exposed the weak underbelly of the right's issues with race. Not to say the left doesn't have them, because we all heard Harry Reid's comments about, you know, Obama being a quote-unquote well-spoken Negro. But, I mean, it definitely does expose the right's more difficult way of covering that up and saying, all right, well, why didn't you? When he says, you know, I believe my record speaks for itself, you know, there was almost like, okay, well, we'll accept that. And at some point, we don't need to accept that. At some point, the voting audience has to say, no, I don't know that your record stands for itself, because I don't know what you're saying anymore. You claim that there's still a presence of Al-Qaeda in Iraq. Dude, we've gone over this, you know. How many hearts do you need to have in your chest before you come up with the right answer? At some point, you know, you just need to be honest with the American public and admit that you made a mistake. That's also another issue. They don't see accountability, so they feel uninspired to get behind a candidate. When someone comes out and said, no, this was my fault, I did this, you know. Katrina, Bush, no accountability. You know, I'm sorry, I should have done more. I thought it was all in Brownie's hands. He was doing a heck of a job. Well, he wasn't doing a heck of a job. He wasn't doing any job. And as a result, American citizens, you know, I know there are some people watching this that, you know, they would probably be less affected if they weren't American citizens. But I as a person that believes in God and really feels the pain of innocent people, it doesn't matter if they were citizens or not. They were people who were dying because of the negligence and the corruption in the American system. When you have an Arabian horse racer put in charge of FEMA, you know, when people see that happen, when they see that cronyism, that's when they get uninspired. I would just tell them that if they don't vote, they're going to see more of the same. The martyr doesn't come from the idea of needing to die for revolution. It comes from the idea of needing to live for revolution. You know, in the martyr's perception in, for example, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, is that the revolutionary must become the martyr because there are parts of him that must die. The selfishness, the ego. This is a process of death. It's not like just one day he wakes up like, oh, you know, now I don't have any issues. I could look past race and sexual orientation and class and get to the core problems that people have and how they need to be addressed. That's a process. That's a process that I've taken years and years to address. You know, updating my music, updating my flow, updating my skills, you know, updating the way my message gets across to people. So I would say it's more based upon that, not the necessity to give your life in terms of killing yourself or destroying yourself, but of giving your life by dedicating yourself, by working hard, and maybe not in a conventional way. You know, maybe you are a revolutionary lawyer, a revolutionary doctor, an independent journalist. You know, maybe you offer health care to people in the hood. Maybe you do take pro bono cases. Maybe you're a psychologist that deals with underprivileged children that are the victims of abuse. I don't know. You can't save everybody, but you can save someone.
The new world order was born on September 11th. And you can't fathom the truth, so you don't hear me. You think Illuminati's just a fucking conspiracy theory?
That's our show for tonight. We want to thank the crew for going out and doing the hard work to get those kinds of exclusive interviews like the one you just saw with Immortal Technique. And we want to remind you, the viewers, that subscribing to PrisonPlanet.tv is one of the best ways to support us, help us get the word out more. And one of the best ways to subscribe is with this holiday special, where you can sign up for a discounted price of $39.95, or you could get the DVDs too, 18 of them, with the subscription for a full year for $129.95. Share the subscription with your friends and family, or even strangers. Give them the passcode, not your personal data passcodes, but one you can make ready to share with people, and help us spread the word about this transmission and reach more people before it's too late. Thanks for tuning in. Alex will be back later. For tonight, that's all we have.